Good day, and welcome back to C's Listening Room. I own a few hundred CDs, I believe, and most of them I like enough to keep. I have gotten rid of quite a few of them. I've traded them in, I've donated them, I've put them in free libraries that I see where people will trade books. But because of that, I've got very few left that I don't particularly care for. And that's good. When I do these videos, I like to find something that I can promote and encourage people to look further into. There have been a few duds on here. There have been a few that I didn't like, and I'm kind of rethinking whether I want to keep those CDs or not. But generally, I like to have something good to say about these CDs. And hopefully people will look into these albums a little bit more. They'll go on YouTube and try to pull up a few of the songs or download the entire album, and hopefully maybe these groups can be rediscovered. But I found one that I don't really care much for, and it's a debut album from G Love and Special Sauce from 1994. And the sticker that came on the front of the album is a quote from the Boston Globe, 10/10 of 1995. And I think it sums up the band's style better than I could. It says, G Love and Special Sauce strips hip-hop down to its funk-based fundamentals and adds a unique bluesy feel. I don't remember what year I bought this album, but I only basically knew the song Cold Beverage from its very, very short stint on MTV. MTV played the video for about a week and then it just kind of disappeared. And it is a cool song. I liked the song, and it made me decide to buy the album a few years later, and quite a few years later. And I do think that description also is pretty apt. But I'm just not feeling this album. I have said in the past that I'm not a fan of rapping. There have been a few cases where there's been a song that's had rap vocals that I've liked. Or there have been even rap songs that I've liked. Those are exceptions more than anything. Those are exceptions to the rule. Those are not typical of my taste. But, I mean, once in a while someone comes up with something that I think is really good, that I like, despite it not being within my preferred style. And so, I mean, there are a couple songs that have rap vocals in it that I've liked. And I'll acknowledge that. But that's typically not the case, and that's one of the big reasons I don't like this album. G Love is basically a rapper, and he's not that good of a rapper. It's kind of mostly spoken word with a little bit of hip hop thrown in there. He's also a guitarist. He's like a blues guitarist, but he has kind of a very weak guitar tone. It's a very thin, weak sound, just basically a straight through the amp sound. I don't really notice a lot of guitar effects. He doesn't really have a lot of good guitar techniques. It just sounds like he's kind of noodling on the guitar. And one problem is he really didn't have any reputation before this album came out. This was like his debut. And he didn't have anything to really compare it to. So we don't know if he's just a sloppy guitar player because that's the style, and he's trying to pay homage to the old like 1950s electric blues players that kind of had that true, raw, stripped down, unrefined sound and style, or if he really wasn't that good of a guitar player at the time it came out with. Like most of those guitar players that play like that have decades worth of work that you compare each other to. So you know they're great guitar players, they're just playing a certain style that requires them to be a little unrefined, a little messy, and a little sloppy. But with this being a young guy with no prior albums and no prior material to compare to, we don't really know what his guitar skills were. So that kind of worked against him a little bit. I'm just not a fan of the guitar sound. Prefer maybe a little more distortion or a little more, maybe a little more overdrive or whatever in the amp. But it is what it is. I mean, the rhythm section, the drums and the bass, those are fine. And that's where you get more into, like, you know, the funk-based elements. So you get almost jazzy there. I have no problem with the drums and the bass. But the focal point of the album is the guitar and the vocals, and I'm not a fan of those. It wasn't a big selling album. Wasn't a real popular album. And I'm not really surprised, to be honest with you. I think they were trying too many things at one time. They were trying to do a blues sound. They were trying to do hip-hop. They were trying to make it a little jazzy. And I don't think it hit any of those fans the way it should have, or the way they wanted it to. For one thing, he noodles a lot on his guitar doing these blues riffs. And I don't think a hip-hop fan really wanted that. I think a hip-hop fan wants beats. They want, like, the drum and the bass. But they don't really want to hear a guy noodling around doing old-school blues moves on a guitar. I think that's a little too outside of hip-hop for a typical hip-hop fan. It's very beat and bass-oriented. And I think there's a little too much guitar in there, and it's not like a real solid guitar rhythm or guitar riff. So it's a little too much of a free-form blues guitar style going on in there in the forefront of the music, I think, for a hip-hop fan to really get into it. At the same time, it's too hip-hop for blues fans. A blues fan might like that kind of unrefined, raw blues guitar style, but they don't want to hear a guy rapping over it. So the two big influences here of hip-hop and blues kind of work against each other, because the fans of each don't want to hear the other sound, and there's a little too much blues for the hip hop crowd, a little too much hip hop for the blues crowd, and I think it loses both of them. Not enough jazz for a jazz fan to really get into it. Not enough funk for a funk fan to get into it. So they're trying like 4 different things at one time. And I don't think there's enough of either to really satisfy those fans, or I think there's too much of them to satisfy them. I think it loses everybody. So I think it was a good attempt at trying something different for 1994, but I think it had a really hard time finding an audience, and I just don't happen to be that audience. I also think they run out of ideas a little too quickly. I had this CD on not too long ago, and I couldn't finish it. It just got too old too quick. I couldn't even finish the CD because I felt like I had heard the entire thing without even getting all the way to the end of it. They seem to really run out of ideas too early on, and the album goes on too long, basically recycling a very limited sound. They're very constrained by with what they can do. There's just very little that they can do with this particular style, and they don't even have enough ideas for that to hold your interest for an entire album. So, on a scale of 5, I would probably give this a 2.5, only because there's a good rhythm section. There's a good drum and bass section. But I just don't think that this particular album is all that good. It's really my taste. It's a matter of it not appealing to me and what I'm interested in, and having a hard time deciding which way it wants to go musically, and probably losing too much of an audience in the process. Cool idea for 1994. Final product leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion. So 2.5 stars for G Love and Special Sauce. Hate to be negative, but what can I say? I'm not going to like everything that I hear. I'm not going to like everything that I buy, and I tried. I tried to like it, just couldn't do it. So that's that. Hopefully my next video is going to be a lot more positive and I'll have something much better to say. Stay tuned. We'll find out. Thanks for watching. Bye.